Welcome back. The third of our blueprint series here on creating objects that go above and beyond normal blueprint procedures is going to be to change a material on a particular object. And for example, I have here this ceiling light that's from an older version of Unreal that I managed to salvage out of an old copy of Unreal and bring in here and got textures and stuff for it. Is what we're going to be doing this with. What we're going to do is we're going to make this light look like it's lit up. It's actually going to emit a glow. Now, what I have provided for you out here in Canvas is I've got the ceiling light. This is the creating a dynamic material change handout. And you have an FBX file, which is the ceiling light model. You have two materials that you need to download. These are both U assets. These are all U assets here, but these are both material U assets that you're going to put inside of a particular folder. Now, Unreal is a little odd about this. When you go in and you create a material with textures, they have to be back in the original folders that they were first created in, and these came out of the original set of starter content. Let me close that out. The starter content down over here. So the starter content comes with materials, props, and textures, and a few other things. What you're going to have to do is, well, you can download the ceiling light and just import it as a model. But the two materials have to go inside of a folder called starter content, materials, and then those two things have to be placed inside of it. The 5 textures that you see here are the 5 textures that are part of those materials. Those need to be placed in the starter content folder inside of a folder called textures. Now, if you do not do that, they can't be imported, by the way. You have to quit the program and go back out and just place those in the folders. That if you don't do that, what will happen is it'll break the link to the images inside of the materials and it won't see it, and you're not going to know which ones go where. So what you're going to do is you can leave the program open, I guess, while you're doing it. But in essence, what you're going to do is you're going to go, pull this up so you can see it. You're going to track down where you have the original folder. And then what you're going to do is you're going to open it up and you're going to see content. And inside of content, you'll see, in this particular case, there's a starter content folder. And I believe I've given that to you already. That's out there in the Google Drive for you to download. Open that up. If there is no materials folder, then you create a materials folder and you're going to put the U assets inside of there. And then you're going to create the textures folder, and if you don't have it already, and then you're just going to put those 5 textures directly inside of there. And then they should show up automatically and everything should work for you, so you're all set and you're all ready to go. Get that folder back over there where I was. Okay, so you're going to download those things and do that. So here's basically the way I have this set up. For my static meshes, there is the ceiling light. Now, that has 3 material slots that make it up. Okay, the second slot here, and you, by the way, in the material editor, if you're not sure, when you have multiple slots and you're not sure what is what, there's a little highlight button there, and the highlight button will highlight that particular element so you know what's supposed to go where. Okay. The second one is the burnished steel metal texture. The element number 2, or the third slot down here, is just the metal steel texture. And then what I did was I created a material to go into slot number 1. Now let me show you what that looks like. And that's just this. It's a very simple texture. But this is the important thing that you have to know. Okay, I just needed a constant value. I wanted it to be white. So I don't need to put a constant 3 vector in here. A constant 3 vector would give me RGB values. It would give me 3 of them like this. And I can do this with that, but I only really need to have white or black. I don't really need to have a color. So in this particular case, white would be a single constant, and then it's just set to number 1. And what that does is that creates a white material. And then this is the important one. Okay, under emissive color. This is a scalar parameter. Now, the way we get a scalar parameter, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete that right here. The way that we get a scalar parameter, okay, is you can get it using, there's 2 ways to do it. One, you can just create a constant like that. You can right click on it and say convert to parameter. Okay. or you can hold down the S key, S for Sam, on your keyboard, and left click, and you'll get the exact same thing. This is called a scalar parameter. And I'll wire that into a missive. And then what you can do with this is you can give it a name. In this particular case, I'm going to name my parameter light on. And I'm going to leave the value set at 0. Now, if I set the value on this to 5, you'll see what happens. That thing glows. If I set it to 0, it looks like it's not glowing. So what we're going to do is, because this is a dynamic parameter, what I can do is I can change this number from other places within the program. Specifically, we're going to change it from inside a blueprint. So I'm going to create a blueprint on that object that allows me to go in and change the value of this scalar parameter from 0 to 5 when I want it to go on. And then I can set it back to this. That allows me to use one material to do two different jobs. It can be a light that's off, or it can be a light that's on, and I don't have to go in and say, let me create one light. I'll create one material that's going to represent this in one state, and then I'll create another material that represents it in a different state, because what I would have to do is I would have to duplicate everything. I would have this particular ceiling light right here, and what I could do, and I have done this before when I was first learning how to do this, the way I would set that up is I would create a material like this with the light off, put it on that ceiling light, and then what I would do is I would create a second lamp, or a second ceiling light, version number 2, and I would put on a different material, material number 2, and then what I would do is I would very carefully place it in exactly the same place that the first one was. And then I would use Blueprint to, using a trigger switch, or trigger volume. If you stepped into the trigger, it would then hide one of those two models and unhide the other one. And then when you stepped out of that trigger box, it would hide the one that appeared, and the original one would reappear. And it happens so quickly you can't actually see it. It's not like there's a lag when that happens, but the point is, it took two models and two textures to do what a single model and a single texture could do. And this is way cheaper in terms of memory. So this is the way we're going to set it up. So just know that this scalar parameter that you have here, also, I'm going to show you something here really quickly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take that material right here, and I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to go create a material instance. We really didn't talk about material instances yet, but this is a relatively short video, so I can show it to you here. Creating a material instance is going to make it's just going to add instance at the end of that, and it has to think about it for a second, because it actually has to go in and get all those little values. And then it comes up. Now, when I open it up, it looks different than a regular texture. There's the regular texture, or the regular material, excuse me. That's what the material looks like in my window right here, but this is what a material instance looks like. Okay, now here's what it does. It tells me the physical material. Physical materials would be, and I have mentioned that earlier, a physical material gives me the ability to do things like add sound effects. So if you're walking on metal, your footsteps are going to sound different than if you're walking on grass. So if I make it a physical material, then it has sound properties and a few other properties as well. Maybe it has a particle system that little puffs of dust come up when you walk, things like that. And then it shows me the parent. This is the parent. It comes out of the ceiling light. Now, that variable that I created right here, this scalar parameter that I named light on, appears in my instance right here. All right. Now, what I can do is I can then check this button and then change this value to whatever I want. I can go in and change the value on this, and I can use this in a variety of ways. In essence, what it does is it allows me to create a base texture and then to create variations off of it. So I can then take and put this on a different light, or I can say, let's go back and let's do this. Let's yeah. Okay. There we go. So we'll go back to this ceiling light over here, and we'll take this and we'll turn this. I'm going to make this a constant 3. I'll delete that one. Oops. We'll delete this, and I'll take this constant 3 and I'll wire it down into my base color. And then what I'll do is I'm going to change this to white, so it looks exactly the same as it did before. All right. And then I'm going to right click and I'm going to say convert it to a parameter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the color parameter to be light color. So I now have two parameters. I have light on, and I have this is the emissive color, and I also have one for the color itself. So when I save that, and then I'll go back out over here and we'll open up this instance. Now I have two values in here. I can check that, I can turn it on, and I can say let's make this one red and let's make that glow. Or maybe set that to 2 or set it to 1. And I get a little bit different color that's a little bit more reddish. Okay, or I can click on this and make it blue. And take that back down to this. I've got a blue light or a red light or whatever I want, and yet I'm not changing the original color. So I'll save that. I really don't want to keep that, but I've got it. But that's what a material instance is, and that's what those scalar values allow you to do. Let's delete that because I don't need it. So my ceiling lighting here, I've got this one. I'm going to convert that back to a constant. And I'll leave that as it is. But it does show you in the handout exactly how to do that. The important one here is that light on scalar value down there. And then what I did was I apply that to the third slot, the original slot on this. Number 1 is my ceiling light. So that's what it looks like when it's off. And then what I did was, in my world, I just added one more little piece of wall right there, and I scaled the light down, and I put it up here. And what this is going to allow me to do is when I run in here, it's just going to make that a little bit darker, so I don't have to mess with the lighting. It's just going to make it a little bit darker. And what we're going to do is we're going to make that be a trigger, so when I step into that, light's going to go on, and it's going to glow, like there's actually light coming out of it. So in order to do that, let's go back out to my ceiling light. I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to do the same thing I've done before. Asset actions, create a blueprint using this one. I'll put it in the same folder, my static meshes, and I'm going to call this one BP underscore ceiling light 2, because I've already got one. Right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a light to this because it does need to act like it's giving off light. A glow does not give off light, so it'll look like it's got light coming out of it, but it actually doesn't. So I'm going to need to actually have to fake that using a real light. And then I'm also going to add a trigger, so there's something that I step into that's going to make that work. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's rename that static mesh to ceiling light. Okay, I'm going to add a component in here. I'm going to add a point light, and I'm going to pull it out in front of it. And I'm going to line it up so it's just about in the center. And pull it up maybe about like that. It's going to give off light and pretty much in all directions, so that's going to be pretty good. Okay, it's also going to, this is going to cast shadow, so it's going to simulate this light is going to cast a shadow of the box around it, which is going to be pretty good. So I just need to pull that out in front of it just a little bit. And I'll leave that point light for right now. I don't really need to change the name of that one. I'll leave that as point light. If you need to change the intensity, I think what I am going to do on this one is maybe turn that intensity down just a little bit, because that is pretty bright. I'll turn it down. I'll take that from 5,000 down to about 2,000. And I can always come back and change that back up if I want to. But I think that's about the only change I'm going to make to that. And then I'm going to come back over here again, and we're going to add a component, and we're going to add a box collision. And the box collision in this particular case is I'm going to pull it out, and I'm going to maybe make it a little bit bigger. And I'll lower it down a little bit based upon where I have it. And if you remember, if you're not quite sure where this is or whether it's going to work for where your player is, all you need to do is to come up here and click compile, and I'll pull this off to the side. Okay, there's my light number 2. I'm going to change with that thing selected down over here. Let me do a quick file, save all. With that thing selected, now I can right click on it, and I can go and let's swap it out, and I can see where my trigger is. And I can see the trigger probably needs to be lowered a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll come over and I'll pull this down, compile that, and then go back and see. I just want to have something that I step into before that light turns on, and I think that's going to work just fine for me for that. Now, the last thing that I have to do is that light is supposed to be off to start with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the name of this first. We'll call this one light trigger. So that's done, and then I'm going to click on my point light, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go down to where it says visible, and I'm going to uncheck it so it is turned off. And we'll save that. We'll close that just to see how that works, and then we'll go back around this way, easiest way around. I want to go pick up the key to do it. And you can see the light. I go to the trigger, nothing happens. There's nothing yet, but the light looks like it's off. In fact, I could probably, even if I wanted to, go back into that material and maybe make that look, if it's in the shade, maybe even make it look a little bit more gray. So I will come back to this and we'll click on that box, and let's just make that light look a little bit more gray. Maybe even a little more gray than that. Sometimes you have to kind of overcompensate for that just a little bit. We'll save that up. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. Remember, half of what you do in here is always testing the same things over and over again. Yep, it's in a darker room, so that's in a darkened area, so it looks kind of, it is not on. All right. Perfect. So we'll go back over here and let's open up our ceiling light over here, and I'm going to remove all of these elements because I don't need any of those things in there for that. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to start to create our lighting. Now, the first thing that I need to do is we're going to change our construction script. And the reason we're going to do that is because we're going to call for a dynamic material. A dynamic material is a material that changes. Anything dynamic changes. A static light is a light that just doesn't move. A dynamic light moves. Static shadows are shadows that don't move. Dynamic shadows move. Same thing is true with a material. A material that changes or moves from one material to another is called a dynamic material. And in order to create a dynamic material, what I need to do is I need to create an addition onto my construction script that tells the program to go ahead and make that material be dynamic. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to select my ceiling light because that's where we're going to start. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to right click and I'm going to type in and look for Create Dynamic Material Instance. Okay, so there is a Create Dynamic Material Instance. It's under Material, and it doesn't really matter. It's listed under 2. This is one of those that doesn't really matter which of the 2 that you use. The important thing that you're looking for here is the one that says Ceiling Light. Okay, now I'm dealing with the material, so that's what I'm going to do. Create Dynamic Material Instance Ceiling Light. And when I select it, it's going to come in and it's going to already have the ceiling light attached to it. And I just need to wire this over to that. All right, so the construction script now says create a dynamic material instance on what object? Well, the object I'm creating it on is this. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this return value right here. I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to say promote to variable. Now when I do that, this thing pops up over here. It says set the new variable. And then there's a new variable that's been added over here in my little variables list. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that, and we'll come up here and we'll change the name of that to dynamic material. All right, so now it says dynamic material right here, and it's all set. That's kind of all I've got to do to get this thing set up to be able to read the fact there is going to be a dynamic material involved. So this is pretty good. We're going to go ahead and we'll compile that, and we will save it. And you can see, notice it's running. It's like it's basically it runs right away, because this is what this does. Construction set is something that happens as soon as you play a level. This whole system is running. So now I'm going to go back to my event graph, and now what we're going to do is we're just going to do some basic event graph work. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my light trigger, and I'm going to say we need to step onto that light trigger, so let's go to collision on component begin overlap. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that dynamic material that we've got over here, and I'm going to take it, I'm going to drag it out, and we're going to say get. Get is going to give me this little capsule down here. Remember, you can also do the same thing by holding down Control and dragging it out. It's going to give you the exact same thing. It's just a shortcut. So if you just need to get that value, I just want to have that dynamic material here, then that's really all you have to do. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come out of here and I'm going to type in set scalar parameter. And we're going to get the set scalar parameter value. And then I'm going to wire that up into that. All right. Now, here's what this thing does. Is this set scalar parameter value, remember, that's what I created. My material has a scalar parameter built into it, and I called that light on. All right. So the light on value I set to 0. And I wired that into my emissive. Well, what I want to do to make it look like it's glowing is I want to change that light on variable from 0 to 5. So if I change this to 5, what that's going to do is now when I step on the trigger, it's going to take that material and change the value of it from 0 to 5. Okay, so let me run a little test here. I'm going to do a compile. And let's run a little test back out over here. Let's go and run around back behind that thing. And let's get close to it. Okay. Now, it's doing it. Watch the wiring here. Okay. Watch the wiring down there. Now it's working. It's doing it. Now the reason it's not going on is because I have it turned off. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take these two elements right there, just widen that out a little bit, and I'm going to pull them over to here. And what I'm going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to say, look, we need to turn that light on. Step into the trigger. I want to turn that light on, and I want to change this. So what we're going to do is we're going to come out of here and we're going to type in toggle visibility. And the one we're looking for here is going to be the point light. So again, it comes in with the point light already attached to it. Toggle visibility. So when I step into the trigger box, it's going to turn that light on, and then what it's going to do is it's going to change that dynamic value from 0 to 5. We'll pull this back over here, and we'll go back over and test it out. Okay, so you can see it's functioning up there. So not only did that light go on, because here's, if you're not quite sure that it's working, okay, there's a combination of two things going on. One, I have the object is set to glow, and there's a light going on. Let me escape from this, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to set this value back down to 0. All right, this is in essence saying make no change in that scalar parameter. And I'll go back and we'll show you what it looks like with just the light. Okay, so it's going on, but it's not quite as bright and doesn't really have that glow effect going on. It's just there's a light up there, but it's not really glowing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over to here and we'll set this back to 5. Compile that. And I've got much more of a glow effect going on up there of what's going on. So I think that that's going to work pretty well. But what this is doing is it shows you again that you can change a material using that particular event. Now, had I gone back and said, let's maybe make the material in that, the color itself be a value, a scalar parameter, I could go back and change that. Then I would be able to come in here and do the same basic thing. I could say change the light from black to white. I could change the material from steel to whatever. I can change just about anything on there as long as I have that parameter value has been set up and is ready to go. So that's how we do a dynamic material change. And the next thing we're going to do, and the last thing we're going to show you on this, is we're going to show you how to turn this game into a flashlight game. Now I'm going to be using the same world, but when I come back you're going to see it's going to be a lot darker so I can at least see my flashlight show up, because right now it's not going to show up. So we'll come back and we'll show you that one here in just a moment.